See that?
Yes, I can see that, and I just started the recording actually, just as an FYI for everyone.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so today what we're going to be going over is we're going to do just a general overview of paperless, but we're really going to focus on the invoice entry side of things. And I'm going to take you start to finish of getting a document, when it first comes in, how we capture it into paperless, pushing it into a queue to process, processing that, routing it for approval, and then the final push from paperless into the accounting system. Okay, so let's talk about capturing first. So up here on top, I have various different tabs, and there's one over here towards the left that says capture. And we have some different capturing options here, but to be honest, these options really aren't utilized too often. Most customers rely on what is called the drag and drop to get documents into paperless, okay? And what I'm about to show you, this can be done from a document on a desktop, like I'm about to do, but it can also be done the same exact way from dragging an attachment from an email or grabbing a document or set of documents from a shared file or somewhere in your file browser. So I'm going to grab this invoice sample here. And as soon as I drag this over and I hover over my paperless screen, I have 8 different options that pop up. Okay. And the two that are, mainly used when it comes to invoices are going to be these two down here on the bottom left, push to queue and split. So before I drop this into this push to queue, let me explain to you what a queue is, because it's a very important component of paperless and invoice processing. So your queue, I like to equate that to your desk at work, right? When you want somebody to work on something, you're going to go place that document and go and place it on their desk, right? Your queue serves the same exact function in paperless. So I'm going to drop this into this queue, into the push to queue, and then the image opens up in the background. And then I have this window pop up, and it emphasizes this queue drop down here because this is going to give me a list of all the available queues that I have available in my system. So you'll notice that I have some queues that are designated for individuals, like I have my own, Kathy has her own, but then I also have queues that are specific to a certain document type, or we can have shared queues. So if you're a company that has maybe multiple people that are completing, invoice entry that are doing that task, then we might want to have just one queue, call it invoice entry, and have shared access to that queue. That way, all of our processors can work off of the same list of invoices rather than having to divvy these out to individual queues, evenly, right? So you have the ability to do both ways. We can have individual ones, we can have shared ones, or you can have a combination of both like I'm showing you now. So for right now, we're going to click this invoice entry queue. That's the one we're going to select. I'm going to click OK. It looks like nothing has happened. It still has our image in the background. But if we go over here to AP Flow invoice entry, that's how we get to our queue. There's our document waiting for us right here. Okay, so it did indeed push it to that queue, and it's waiting here to be processed. Now let me go over, I told you that there was 2 methods that are used when it comes to capturing. Let me show you the second one. The second option is the document splitter, and it's the split option here. So before I drop this in here, let me give you a scenario, because I'm sure a lot of you today have encountered this. So if you have an accounts payable email address that vendors send in invoices to, a lot of times those vendors will get lazy on you, and they'll send you multiple invoices, but instead of breaking those out into separate attachments, they'll just jumble them all up into one, right? And so what you have to do as a user, you have to go in, usually print those out, scan them all in all separately, right? It's a whole task in itself. Well, now you no longer have to do that. You can take that one PDF attachment that has multiple invoices in there and drop it into the split document function. What this document splitter does is it allows you to take multiple documents and split them up into individual documents. So this one right here is a 2-page document. You even have a thumbnail view that you can take advantage of here. So this is a very simple example. I just have 2 pages. Right now, Paperless views this as one document that's 2 pages long. Okay, I have to tell it otherwise. So if within this PDF here, if page 1 is one document, page 2 is a totally different separate one. If we look over here on the right where our splitter utility is, I have a ribbon here that says use spacebar to place a page break between your pages. So I'm going to go here to page 1. I'm going to hit my spacebar. There we go. And it's going to place a page break in between those pages. So now Paperless is recognizing, okay, page 1 is one document, this page 2 is another document. So it's very easy to quickly split those up, and you don't have to even worry about printing it out, scanning it back in separately. You can do all of that splitting from here. And to take it a step further, one of the things you can do is if I double click here where it says my name, Jacob Salazar's queue, from within this split, I can actually send this to different queues if I need to. Maybe this first one needs to go to the invoice entry queue as an invoice that needs to be processed. Maybe the second document needs to go to Kathy's queue. And I can split that and it'll send those out to the designated queues that I've selected. Okay? So those are two very manual ways to capture that a lot of customers, are still taking advantage of. Paperless has developed some more automated ways that you can capture now, and I'm going to go over those right now. So on this capture tab, I have an importer option. And the two import capturing jobs that are available, the first one is the email import. What the email import does is that if you have an accounts payable, email address that vendors, send invoices into, what we can do is, map and configure Paperless to pull from the inbox, from that payables inbox, and it'll automatically move over the attachments into a queue of our choice. Okay, so here, I'm not going to do the whole setup here, but just to kind of just give you a run through, this is where I say, okay, I have Outlook, I have Gmail, I want this pulling from this inbox here, and I want all documents that are being pulled, all the attachments, I want them to go into this queue, to this invoice entry queue. Okay, so this is one newer feature that a lot of customers are moving to automate, the capturing process. Another option that you have is what's called the folder watch. The folder watch is the same basic concept as this email import, but instead of pulling from an email inbox, it's pulling from a folder that you can have set up like on one of your shared drives or on your desktop. So for example, I have this paperless folder here, okay, if you can see my desktop. And everything that I want brought into paperless, I'm just going to drop into this folder. And what's going to happen is that there's a job running in the background that's going to pull any document that's in here and move it over into paperless automatically. Okay, so those are two options. The folder watch is a really good one because let's think about our email import for a second. One thing that I've been seeing lately is that vendors are sending in invoices that have like links on them, right? And you have to click the link and it takes you to a website, and then you have to download that whole invoice image. Paperless isn't, as much as I'd want it to be, it's not that sophisticated where it's going to go know to do all that, right? So what would happen is that it would error out and say, hey, this type of invoice is not compatible with paperless. So there are potential, think of all the different variables when it comes to emails, right? That could potentially stuff up this email import. Whereas the folder watch, you're controlling everything that we drop into that folder. So it never errors out because you're only going to put, compatible documents in there. Now you can have both of these can work, in conjunction with each other. You can have both of these running at the same time, and you can also have multiple email imports, multiple folder watches at one time. So both of those are great methods of capturing that are worth looking into. Okay. So let's jump back to our first example where we push that document to our queue. It's over here in the invoice entry queue. And now we're going to go ahead and start processing this invoice. Now, before I jump into the invoice entry screen and start coding and doing all that stuff, I like giving this general overview of how the document is going to flow through Paperless here within this queue. So here's our queue. Here's our list of documents. If we look on the very bottom of my screen here, you'll notice I have 3 different tabs down here, and I hope everybody can see this. This first one that we're on is unprocessed. So right here, this is where all of our unprocessed invoices and documents will appear. Okay, this means they have not been touched. Nothing has happened to these documents. No data has been entered. They're fresh. They're new. This is where they'll all pile in. Okay. Once we have started the data entry and the invoice entry process, the invoices will move into the second phase, which is work in process. Within this work in process, I have various different statuses here, okay? So let me go over these. So this first one is incomplete. This is where all of the invoices that I have started and have not yet finished are gonna be. So let's say we're working on an invoice. Maybe I've put in the vendor, I put in the invoice number, the amount, and then it's time for lunch. And I don't really want to finish this. I'm hungry. I want to go to lunch. So when I get back from lunch, my invoice is going to be waiting for me right here in the incomplete folder. Okay, and I can go in. It'll save my work. I can just jump right back into it, finish it out, and keep trucking along. The second status here is approved. This is where all the invoices that I have routed out for approval that have indeed been approved, this is where they're going to pile in, and you can track and see who approved them down here. Next up, we have pending. Pending is going to be all the invoices that you have routed out for approval that are still pending in approval. And again, if you click on the invoice, you can see the invoice image, but also you can see down here the status. So it's nice to see that just by clicking on it. And then lastly, we have our rejected status. This is going to be where invoices that we have routed out for approval, they have been rejected back to us. They're going to pile in this rejected folder. Now, one feature with Paperless in this reject function that's really nice is that when an approver rejects an invoice, maybe it's coded to the wrong job number, maybe it's to the wrong vendor or amount that the processor entered, and so they rejected it back. The system is going to force that approver to provide a reason why they rejected it. So that way, when the invoice goes back to the initial processor, they're going to know exactly what changes need to be made. So as I click on this rejected invoice here, and if we go over here down here to the notes log, you'll notice here on this note over here it says reject reason and it says wrong job number. Okay, so that's just an example of how that reject feature works, and this prevents invoices coming back to the processor and the processor having no clue why it's being sent back to them. Right? They're going to know exactly why because of that reason there. They'll make those changes and then send it back out for approval. All right, so that's the work in process tab. Those are all the statuses there. The last tab here within the queue is what we call the admin tab. Now, this is where all of the exporting takes place. And by exporting, I mean pushing it from our fully approved invoices from Paperless and posting them into Sage. All right, so all of our fully approved invoices will pile in here. You won't have to worry about invoices not being approved because they're not going to be in this screen unless they have received all approvals. So really, this is the easiest part. This is where you go in, you'll check, which ones you want to send over. A lot of times you'll just go into check all, and then you'll export and push those. And we'll go over that a little more in depth here in a second. So I like giving that overview. It usually saves some questions as I'm going through the example. So let's jump into the example now. I have my invoice here. I'm going to click on new invoice, and this is going to open up my invoice entry screen. Now, one thing I'll tell you from the get-go, just kind of disclaimer, you'll see me squeezing this invoice entry screen where I can't really see my image. If you do have two monitors, then you're going to be able to have this invoice entry screen on one screen, and that way you can see your full image on the other. Okay. I can only share one screen at a time here, so that's why I'm having to do it this way. So I'm going to talk just as I'm filling this information out. Everywhere where you see it's blue and underlined, that's where I can click here and retrieve a list. So part of the way that Paperless is connected into your accounting system, it's what we call we're bridged to the actual database of in your accounting system. So let's say I have an invoice for a new vendor. I can go into the accounting system, set up that vendor, and immediately it's going to be available here within Paperless because Paperless is pulling from that exact same list and table, right? Let me go here. So this is what we call this top portion here is called the header portion of the invoice. So we'll fill all of this out. Once we finish out, and you'll notice there, as I put in the invoice date, it automatically filled in the due date, the discount date. That's because, again, with that connection, we already know what the payment terms are for that vendor. Okay, so it automatically filled that in for us, put in my total. So I filled out all the relevant fields here that I'm interested in on this top portion. The next part is we're going to apply our distribution or our coding. And we're going to do that up here on this green plus sign. You're going to hit new line, and then these are your options of different lines that you can apply. Now these lines are specific to where exactly this needs to be coded to. So if I have an invoice that needs to be coded directly to the job to hit job cost, I'm going to hit job, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to enter, fill in what job number it's for. And you have a filter list. This gives you your full job list, again, coming straight from the accounting system. You'll go in, you'll select your phase. If you use phase, you have your cost codes. Notice that it automatically pre-filled the cost code and GL account. Any sort of pre-fills that you have set up in the accounting system, those are going to be relayed over here as well. So Paperless is designed to parallel your accounting system as closely as it can. So all of those presets and pre-fills will all be generated over here and come over as well. If you need to add another line of coding, you can do so. You just hit the green plus sign, or you can go up here and add another one as well. Okay, so you can add as many lines of coding as you need to, and you'll just go in and fill those in. So notice on this top portion of my options here of my different line types that I can add, these first 5 options, it says add blank line. So you'll notice that when I selected job, everything here was mostly blank. I had to go in and select my job, right? If I go here to expense, everything will be blanked out. I'll have to go in and just fill in the blanks basically. Down here, your last 2 options, you have quick list. Now, if your your company uses purchase orders and subcontracts, any sort of commitments, then you're going to want to use this quick list. And let me show you why. In this example, I'm going to use the subcontract quick list because this invoice needs to be coded to a subcontract. I'm going to select the subcontract quick list. I'm sorry, it looks like I selected purchase order on accident. There we go. I'm going to click on subcontract. And what's nice is it only gives me the available subcontracts for that vendor that I entered in on the step before. So here are my list of my subcontracts. I'm going to select this first one. And it's going to give me the available line items that I have for that subcontract. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm selecting from data that's already been entered in Sage. Okay, whether it's 100 or 300, you're going to enter that subcontract information, prior to receiving your invoice. So now we're just going to go in and select what we want to apply to this invoice. So if you have multiple line items, you'll go through and make sure you select the right line. This is a simple example, so we just have one. I'm going to pick that. You'll notice over here to the right, it gives me my full committed amount of the subcontract. It gives me, my job cost to date, so I can account for, what all has been a cost currently. I have my unposted amount, so I can even account for things that is currently in Paperless that hasn't been exported and posted into Sage yet. And then I have my variance down here. Okay. Now, if you notice, my invoice total on this example is only $150. This 12,120, this is the amount that's left on this line item. So I don't want to charge that. Obviously, that's significantly more than my invoice total. So you do have the ability to go in and adjust this if you need to. And what's going to happen is it'll just keep a running total. So that amount left on that amount received section will just subtract 150 from that. So when you receive another you adding or so to that amount received. All right, so it's just going to keep it's nice and easy to see that information all there. So I'm going to click on, I got my amount in, I selected my line item. I'm going to click add to invoice. And again, since all this information I'm choosing from a list that's already been created, so it automatically coded all of this for me. It's got my job, it's got my phase, cost code, cost type, because it already knows what all that information should be. Okay. So that's the coding in Paperless. It is designed to parallel your Sage, the way that you currently process invoices. The only thing that's different here is that we have our image to go with it. Let me go over some of the other additional functions here and tools and tricks that we have here on this invoice entry screen that you can take advantage of. Over here on the right, we have what is called the sidebar. And this sidebar is just here for each user. They can set their own preferences and use these tools. They're at their disposal. This alert section here is going to be used on a one-off type basis, more often than not. So, let me give you an example. Let's say we have a very important invoice that comes through. It's high priority. We got to get this pushed through, into the accounting system ASAP. And maybe as the processor, I want to be notified immediately if one of my approvers rejects this invoice. Okay. I can click invoice rejected, and you can opt to receive an alert here on your paperless system, an email alert, or even a text alert. And if you want to receive an immediate alert anytime an invoice has been rejected, then you can select recurring and then one of these other methods, and it'll alert you every single time. So this is a feature that's available here for the processors. It's also available for the approvers in the next step, which we're about to jump into. And so you can, like I said, I see this more used often with the scenario I just gave. Important invoice, high priority. You want to be notified immediately. Some customers don't use this at all, but it is nice to know that it's here. Okay. All of these are fully collapsible, so if you're not interested in it, don't want to see it, you can just collapse it, and the system will remember your change for your login going forward. Here we have our invoice information, just gives you some basic vendor info and also your line totals. This is nice to look at whenever you have multiple lines of coding. You can see the totals of all those lines. This is probably the one that you'll be using the most. It's the invoice notes. This is where, as a processor, you can go in and add notes. It could be pertinent information, about the invoice. It could be used to communicate to the people, the approver you're about to route this to, right? Let me just put in a test note here. Every note in Paperless is date and time stamped. It also lets you know the user that applied that note. And these invoice notes stick with the invoice forever. As long as this document exists in Paperless, the invoice notes and that log will be with it. Okay, so that's the sidebar. Let me go over some of these other buttons here up top. Here you have a vendor history. This is connected directly to your invoice register, so you can see past invoices that have been processed for that vendor. Okay, so these are just tools to help you out. And as I click on each one, you can see how it's listing how those were coded down here on the bottom. So you can refer to those if you need to. Now, this button right here is pretty neat. And so Paperless has two different components to it, okay? We're focusing on AP flow on the invoice entry side. But the other side of using Paperless is the document management side. So we can store all sorts of different backup documents in Paperless. We can store subcontracts, purchase orders, receiving tickets, pick tickets, drays, if those are documents that you use, certificates of insurance, W-9s, all those different types of backup documents, okay? And what we're going to do with those is we're going to index those. And all index means is electronically filing away in our system. So instead of having those documents and sticking them in a file cabinet, we're going to now store them in Paperless. All right, now, so here's the deal. So with a subcontract, for example, this invoice is being coded to a subcontract. The actual copy of the subcontract that we'll have, we're going to get that more often than not. We're going to get that prior to the invoice. So when we get the copy of that contract, we're going to file that away in Paperless. And if we're doing so, then we can take advantage of this button here, Document Match. So check this out. When I click this, you'll notice that it's going to say Retrieving Related Documents. And what that means is it's going through your system and it's trying to find documents that you've already stored away that match the vendor of this invoice we're working on, that match the job of this invoice that we're working on, okay? And also the subcontractor purchase order information. So if we look up here, I have my invoice image, but look at this. It automatically attached the copy of the contract right behind it. Okay, I didn't even have to do anything other than hit that document match button. So this is where we tie the two together, where we tie the document management side and then the invoice entry side together. You'll be able to attach. And so I see this used a lot with contracts, as I just did, commitments, but also receiving tickets. If you're a company that uses receiving tickets or pick tickets, then this is where we can attach those. And here's the thing is that since this is attached now as I get ready to route this to my approver, the approver is going to see the invoice image and then also the backup right behind it, right? Now, if you're a customer that, let's say your project manager or approvers are the ones that are going to apply the coding. Maybe the first line, the processors, they don't know the coding. And so maybe we need to send the invoice to them blank. Paperless does have a workflow for that, okay? And all the bare minimum you'll have to do here is just apply a line, but the information in the line can be blank. So if that's your workflow, your approvers are the ones that are applying all the coding, then no worries. We'll just send the line to them blank. They'll be able to apply the coding on the next screen like I'm about to show you. Okay. So when the invoice is ready to be routed, we're going to click Route Invoice. The routing screen will pop up. So in Paperless, you do have the ability to create routing rules. Paperless has its own in-house routing rules. Also, if you use the job authorization feature within Sage 100 or 300, and if you have like, I believe it's salesperson, estimator, superintendent, something like that, it has options. If you have a person plugged into one of those fields in the job setup, Paperless can read that as well, so that it knows who to send it to based on who you have set up there. So this example, you'll notice that as soon as I hit route, this name popped up, the SPC administrator. And if I go over here to check invoice routing rules, you'll notice that I created a role before this. And I said that any job, any invoice that's coded to job 201, and if you notice in my coding, that's what this is coded to, I need it sent to this SPC administrator. So that's just an example of how the routing rules work. It'll automatically populate who it needs to go to. But one really cool feature that Paperless has that other platforms don't is that Paperless is open and it gives you the ability to route this to who you need to at any given time. So some customers who don't want to be tied to routing rules and just want the freedom to be able to send it to whoever they want at any given time, Paperless allows you to do this. You can go to Add Reviewer. This will give you a list of all your approvers in the system. You'll select who you want to send it to, and you can just simply select their name and it'll add them to this approver list. Okay. So I have my person. I'm going to send it to this SPC administrator. I'm going to hit route, and it's going to send that along. Now, let's take a look at what Paperless is going to look like, what the invoice is going to look like for our approvers. Okay. So we clicked on invoice entry to get to our queue. Invoice entry is going to be for your processors. That's the button that they're going to click. Right next to it, we have approve invoices. Approve invoices is where your approvers are going to go. This module is designed for them. So this is where they're going to go. So this is the approver screen. You'll notice it looks fairly similar to the invoice entry screen. Really, the main difference here is that your approvers cannot access the header data. So they can't change the vendor name, they can't change the due date, the totals. Most customers are they're fine with that because they don't want them adjusting that anyways. If you do want them to adjust that, then there's an edit invoice button that we can give them. So just keep that in mind. One question that I commonly get on the screen, hey, like where's the image? And my approvers are going to need to see the image. You'll notice that as I click on each one of these, the image is displaying in the background. So they will have access. So this is another example of if you do have, 2 monitors or more, you can have this approver screen on one, nice and blown up and full, maximized, and then you can have your image in the background as well. So let's take a look at what we got going on here on this approver screen. So here your pending invoices will appear up and down right here with your data left to right. Over here on the left, we do recommend you keep this on pending, but one reason why you might want to go to this drop down is notice this Paperless automatically filters these out by jobs for your approvers. So if they want to go in and maybe they don't want to just look at pending and see invoices for all their jobs, they just want to go one job at a time, they'll be able to do that through this filter, and that takes place automatically. Now, down at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and use this one for as our example for the approvers. So as I click on this, like I said, Paperless has a workflow for it. If you want your approvers to apply the coding and maybe change it on the fly, then they can do that. If you don't want your approver doing anything and you just literally want them just approving or rejecting, we can do that as well. And let me give you an example of that. So for this example, I have this invoice coded to a job, right? And you'll notice that I have my job field open, my phase field open, my cost code field open. So my approvers in my system, they have the ability on the fly, maybe this is the wrong job, okay? They can go in and adjust that and change that. If they need to adjust the cost code, they can do that. But one of the things with Paperless is that you can turn on or off these fields according to, to who you want to be able to adjust them. So in my case, you'll notice that when I go over to GL account here, I do not want my approvers in my system adjusting the GL. I'm fine with them adjusting the job and cost code and the cost type, but I don't want them messing with this GL. And so you'll notice that it's grayed out. And no matter what I do, if I click on it, I cannot adjust that. So you have full control in Paperless to be able to decide, which fields you want them to manipulate and which ones you don't. Right. Also, one of the other permissions that you can give them, there's two here on this middle line, right here where it's orange on the far left. There's this button here. The red and green arrows looks like a recycling emblem. This is the change line type button. So if you want to give your approvers to access to adjust invoices and change the coding on the fly, then this is one button you might want to give them. So the invoice that we're currently looking at was coded to a job. Maybe the approver looks at it and says, actually, this needs to go to a subcontract. Okay, they can change that line type from here. Okay, with that function. Another thing they can do, if you want to give them that permission, is the option to split the line. Notice our invoice here. It just has one line of coding, right? If they have access to the split line, they can turn this one line into 2 lines, 3 lines, as many lines as they need to. They can drill in here and adjust that information, and then they can split that up accordingly. Okay. So really the power is in your hands. It just depends what your workflow is, what permissions you want to give them. I have some customers that like their approvers and like giving them the freedom to change the coding on the fly and just keep them moving. I have some customers that maybe they don't trust their approvers to do that much. So they're going to lock all of these down and just have their users, rely on the approve button. If everything's good, let's move it on to the next step, hit approve. If there's something wrong with the invoice, then let's reject it. And as I click on this reject button, you'll see here's that mandatory reason that I have to type in here. Okay, you cannot reject an invoice without providing a reason why. Okay. There are some additional buttons that you can give your approvers. And let me show you just kind of how the permissions are broken out, because this is one thing that I think is very, it sets Paperless apart from other platforms. So you'll notice here, these are all of my users in accounts payable, and these are the permissions that I give them. Okay, so first you got to mark, which role they are. Are they a processor? Are they a reviewer? A supervisor would be someone who you want to take advanced actions on invoice. So a supervisor would be able to, for example, override an approval, revoke routing, maybe pull it from somebody and send it to somebody else. They can delete invoices, things like that. Your check review would be for more your I'd say like the check signer of your company, somebody who you want to just view the checks. Maybe they're not too involved in the AP workflow, but they just want to see what's going out the door. The check review would be something that's good to give them. But what I want to show you here is how these are broken out. So let's say Kathy here. Kathy is new to my company, and I don't really trust her to, she's not as seasoned. I don't want her to go and be able to change the line type. I don't want her to be able to go and split the invoice lines up. I don't want her to even place an invoice on hold. Okay. But maybe I have another user like Kelly here. Maybe Kelly is a lot more seasoned. She's been with my company a long time. I trust her to do these things. So I'm going to give her those permissions. So your permissions aren't set by role. It's not something universal that everybody has to have. You can specifically set individually what you want each person's role and permissions to be. So Paperless gives you the freedom to do that, right? But back to our approver screen. Our example here is this one. I can look at my coding down here. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hit approve. And now this invoice will leave my pending folder. And now the next step to do, what we're going to do is export it into the accounting system. Okay, so all of your fully approved invoices will come into here. They'll flow into here. You'll select which ones. If you're Sage 100, Paperless has it automatically posts into Sage 100. So you don't have to do anything else. After you hit this export button, you'll select which posting period you want to go to, what you want to post this into, and then it'll post that automatically. If you're Sage 300, same task. You'll assign what you want your accounting date to be. but you'll have to complete, once the export is done, you'll have to complete a post, which I'm sure everybody who has Sage 300 is familiar with that task. You'll complete a post, and then all those invoices will all flow in to Sage 300 and be posted. Okay, so that's really the only slight difference between 100 and 300 as far as paperless goes and the integration goes. But it's as simple as that. I think I finished right about on time, so we have about 5 minutes. Amy, I don't know if we've received any questions or if anybody has any questions that I could answer at this time.
We have not gotten any questions. Would anybody like to ask a question? Please put it in the chat.
And as we're waiting for questions, paperless does integrate with purchasing and the service module. So if those are modules that you currently use, paperless does integrate with those. Paperless also has a new Procore integration. So if you use Procore, you can import Procore invoices into paperless. So they'll be in there. We can, it'll bring over all that information, and then we can, then export them into Sage. You can get additional approvals on those invoices if you need to. So that integration is fairly new, and it's pretty neat. A lot of customers are taking advantage of that. Also, as one last thing I'll show you, and just to preview here, paperless has what's called the credit card importer. And what the credit card importer is it's a reconciliation feature that, it takes, what we would do is import your credit card statement into paperless so that we have just the transaction. So we would get it into like a spreadsheet format, upload those into paperless. And remember, I spoke a little bit about indexing and filing away those backup documents. So we would file away your credit card receipts as they come in. And paperless has an app that you can snap pictures of those credit card receipts, which really helps rather than keeping those hard copies, right? Because that's a nightmare. And just like I matched up that subcontract to the invoice in the example, what this importer does is it automatically matches the credit card receipts to the transactions in the statement. So if you're doing manual matching currently and keeping up with hard copies of receipts, this credit card importer is a game changer. A lot of customers are moving to that, and paperless actually comes with this. It's not an add-on. It comes with your paperless purchase on any package that you get. So so that's something to look into. That's nice about the software as well.
Well, I think you answered the question that we received.
Oh, really?
Yeah, someone asked, can you please explain how credit cards work in paperless? An older demo did not handle credit cards in Sage 100 well.
Right, and one thing about this credit card importer feature, it has nothing to do. It's not tied to the credit card module in Sage whatsoever. It's a totally different process. And what it allows you to do, I'll show you very quickly because I have a couple examples here. What it allows you to do is this is a small example, but these are my transactions in my credit card statement, right? One of the things that paperless allows you to do is go in and you can sort. I have some customers that want to, their mindset is, hey, I'm going to pay this credit card company all on one check anyway, so I'll just have all these transactions be on one invoice, and I'll have them, just be multiple lines, right? I have some customers that want to organize these maybe by card number. So one of the things you can do here is go to credit card number. I can say, okay, this is one card holder. I'm going to transfer these over here. So I'm going to have one invoice, and I'm going to name this Jacob, Amex, May, right? So that's one invoice. I have 3 lines. I can go in and code those transactions, match the receipts. Of course, I get an error on my example. Okay, and then I can come back over here, get the remaining ones, and say, okay, 4, 5, 6. This is Amy's card. I'm going to create an invoice for Amy. So you can organize them that way, or like I said before, you can just have one big invoice with multiple transactions and lines on them. That's totally fine. So paperless, you can do it either way. It gives you the freedom to do that. But this is where it all ties in. Let me show you the example here in my approved folder. So this is a bank Visa card. This is one of the credit card importer examples I was working on earlier. This is a small example because it only has one line of coding, but see how this has a green check here? When you use this credit card importer, since it's matching the receipts, you can now send these invoices out for approval. So when your approvers get these invoices, they'll be able to look at the invoice, but also if I click this green check, look at there, I can see the exact receipt that goes with this line of coding here for this transaction. And so you're going to have that on each and every transaction in your statement, which is very nice. Okay, you can see the image that goes with all these. Now the credit card importer is pretty sophisticated, so it's kind of hard to go over this in an overview. But if you are interested, feel free to reach out to me. I do have a recorded demo that I could send out so that you can get some more information on that. And for everybody on the call today, if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me or your salesperson, and I'll be happy to answer those.
Okay, we did get one other question regarding licenses.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking if they need a separate license for the paperless module for each user. How does this work?
Good question. So paperless works just like Sage in that paperless is it goes off of concurrent licenses. So you can have 100 people set up, but only a certain amount of them can be logged in at one time. So it's concurrent licensing. Now there are some web options, web applications that paperless provides. One of them is eCapture, which I spoke a little bit about a minute ago. eCapture allows you, it's a phone application that you will give to your card holders that you can snap pictures of your receipts. It also captures other things like job photos and even receiving tickets. Now, when you start using the web application, it turns into named users. But as far as the desktop version, what we're looking at today, right now, it's concurrent licenses. Okay.
Okay. And then someone's asking, actually, we have two different people looking for pricing information. So I'm going to take their names down and I will reach out to the sales reps for each of you. There's two of you, and have them get in touch with you.
All right, that sounds good. And just lastly, for everybody out there, I came to Action from paperless environments. I work directly for the developers of this software, so I am very knowledgeable with it. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to help you out. Okay.
Oh, hold on. It looks like we got one more question. Another person for pricing. So yeah, we've got a couple of people that are interested in pricing. So that's great.
Awesome.
We'll let the sales reps know who was on the call. So I'm sure you might all be hearing from them, but don't worry, they're not going to hound you. But we're glad that you're interested. That's great. We had a great attendance today. And this is being recorded, and I will be sending out a link to the presentation for anybody that wants to go back and review what Jacob went over. And also you can share it with colleagues. If there's somebody that couldn't make it, we did have a handful of people that registered and didn't log in. So if you know somebody that was interested in attending and they didn't make it, well, they'll get it anyways if they registered. But I do want to thank everybody for their time, and reach out to Jacob if you have any questions. I'm sure he'd be happy to help you.
All right.
We did just get another question, but I think I will have Jacob reach out to you, Sharon, just so we don't keep everybody on the line longer. We've already gone over a little bit, so. All right. Well, thank you so much.